What if Jesus and Eshu are two names for the same divine role? What if the healer with parables and the trickster at the crossroads are not opposites, but reflections? Across continents and centuries, humanity has told stories of messengers who challenge, guide, and disrupt. They appear in moments of crisis, speaking riddles or parables, forcing us to choose between comfort and truth. In Yoruba cosmology, that force is ECHU, the Orisha of the crossroads, a divine trickster who tests the heart. In Christianity, it's Jesus, a teacher whose parables flipped moral expectations, whose life was a series of spiritual provocations. This video invites you to walk a sacred path between traditions. It begins with stories. Eshu, laughing at human certainty, scattering messages to force clarity. Jesus, speaking of the last, becoming first, the weak inheriting the earth. In both, we find the spiritual disruptor, the divine messenger. But how deep do the parallels go? We'll explore their origins, the symbols they wear, the powers they channel, and the ways colonization twisted these truths into contradictions. Are these figures cultural strangers, or two faces of the same ancient archetype? If you've ever stood at a spiritual crossroads, this journey is for you. The path is open. Choose to walk it. In the vast spiritual landscape of the Yoruba tradition, Eshu stands at the center, not as a god of chaos, but as a force of divine clarity hidden in mischief. To the untrained eye, he is a trickster. But to those who understand, he is the messenger of fate, the opener of roads, the guardian of balance. He is found wherever decisions must be made, wherever truth must be tested. Eshu is not evil. He is not a devil. He is the one who brings contrast so we may see. He doesn't deceive to destroy, he challenges to awaken. In Yoruba cosmology, Eshu serves as the crucial link between the human and the divine. Without him, no prayer reaches the Orishas. He walks the crossroads, the threshold between what is and what could be. His colors, red and black, symbolize this duality: fire and ash, clarity and confusion, life and death. Eshu's role is to keep humans honest, to test motives, to push people past their illusions until they encounter raw, unfiltered truth. He does not punish, he reveals. And in that revelation, transformation begins. One of the most famous tales of Eshu tells of him walking through a village wearing a hat that is red on one side, black on the other. When he passed between two farmers, each swore he saw a man wearing only one color. The argument escalated into violence until Eshu returned, laughing, and revealed the truth. The point was not cruelty. The point was to expose how limited our perspectives can be and how easily we mistake partial truth for the whole. Eshu's presence is deeply felt across the African diaspora. In Nigeria and Benin, his shrines sit at market entrances, city crossroads, and rural thresholds. In Brazil's candomblé, Cuba's Santeria, and Haitian Vodou, he emerges as ECHSU, Elegua, or Papa Legba, always at the gate, always opening doors, always demanding awareness before access. Offerings of palm oil, rum, cigars, and coins are made not out of fear, but out of respect for the one who keeps the spiritual current flowing. Without Eshu, nothing moves. Modern practitioners invoke Eshu before any ritual, any offering, any act of communication with the divine. His energy is the spark that ignites spiritual dialogue. He is not a being to bypass. He is the checkpoint. The reminder that divinity is not found in comfort alone, but in the tension between clarity and confusion. Eshu is the lesson wrapped in contradiction. To understand Eshu is to confront the uncomfortable spaces in yourself, the contradictions, the ego, the unspoken motives. He is the mirror that doesn't flatter, the voice that doesn't soothe. But through that raw honesty, he brings liberation. He opens the way forward, but only after you've been stripped of your illusions. In the story of Eshu, we find not a villain, but a divine provocateur. One who tests not to condemn, but to prepare. He is the sacred tension that leads to breakthrough. The shadow that must be faced before the light can be seen. And in that, he is not unlike another figure revered across the world. A figure who also challenged norms, flipped expectations, and forced humanity to confront itself through story. But that figure comes next. First, we must understand this. The path to truth often begins at the crossroads. And Eshu is already there, waiting. In the dusty hills of 1st century Judea, another divine messenger walked a different kind of road, one not paved with palm oil and cowries, but with sandals worn thin by journeys through villages, deserts, and temple courts. His name was Jesus. Born into an occupied land, raised under Roman rule, Jesus emerged not as a political rebel with weapons, but as a spiritual agitator armed with words that struck deeper than swords. He was a healer, a prophet, a storyteller, and for many, the anointed one, the Christ. But like Eshu, his message was not easy comfort. It was disruption. Jesus challenged everything: authority, law, purity, power. He spoke in parables that unsettled his listeners, twisting expectations to reveal deeper truths. The story of the prodigal son flipped the idea of justice into mercy. The Good Samaritan shattered the boundaries of identity and worth. Over and over, Jesus used simple stories to expose the blindness of the righteous and the hidden faith of the outcast. Like Eshu, he forced people to see what they were too proud or too afraid to confront. But Jesus was also more than teacher. He was seen as a bridge, a mediator between humanity and the divine. His acts, healing the sick, feeding the multitudes, casting out spirits, were seen as signs of divine authority. His baptism marked not just a personal transformation, but the beginning of a movement. He claimed no throne, yet spoke like a king. He built no army, yet threatened empires. For some, he was savior. For others, a heretic. But for all, he was impossible to ignore. Visually, his legacy became global. The cross, the fish, the loaves, symbols that carried deep meaning across cultures. His stories reached every continent, translated into hundreds of tongues, shaped by different traditions. And yet, at his core, he remained a man of paradox. He spoke of peace but brought division. He taught love but was killed with hate. His words were soft, but their impact shook kingdoms. Throughout history, Jesus has been claimed by empires, churches, and revolutions. But in his own time, he was a threat to all of them. He stood not with the powerful, but with the poor. He entered temples and overturned tables. He saw the invisible and made them seen. And he did it all while calling people to make a choice, to follow, to question, to change. His message was not passive belief, but active transformation. In this light, Jesus begins to resemble more than a prophet. He becomes an archetype, the divine messenger who does not simply deliver truth, but forces it into the open. He is not just a bearer of good news. He is the crossroads itself. The moment where decision, revelation, and risk converge, just like Eshu. Now that we've seen each figure on their own terms, the question rises louder. What connects them? What deeper pattern might be hiding behind their stories, their symbols, their missions? Because if Eshu and Jesus are more than cultural opposites, if they're part of a shared spiritual design, then what we believe about spirit, power, and choice may need to be reimagined entirely. And that reimagining begins with the symbols that hold their secrets: the cross and the crossroads. Two signs, two paths. One sacred question: the cross and the crossroads. Each a symbol etched deep into spiritual consciousness, each marking a moment of decision, transformation, and divine encounter. For Jesus, the cross was the instrument of both death and transcendence, a place where suffering met salvation, where human failure was absorbed into divine mercy. For EHSU, the crossroads is not an end, but a beginning. It is the sacred space where paths intersect, where offerings are made, where choices must be confronted. In both symbols, we are invited to stand still, to reflect, and then to choose. Jesus taught through paradox, "Blessed are the poor, the last shall be first. Lose your life to find it." These teachings do not soothe, they stretch. They demand inner reckoning. ECHU too works in paradox. He leads by misleading, reveals by concealing. He might twist a situation until your hidden motives are laid bare. He creates confusion not to destroy, but to shake us out of our illusions. In both figures, the test is not to pass or fail. It is to become more awake. Both Jesus and EHSU function as divine messengers, but not in the way we often imagine. They do not deliver clear instructions. They present puzzles. Jesus speaks in parables that resist easy interpretation. EHSU disrupts with tricks that demand deeper introspection. Both are concerned with transformation, but they guide through tension, not comfort. They are not gods of simple answers, but of complex truths. Their rituals also echo one another. EHSU receives offerings, palm oil, liquor, coins, at the crossroads to honor his role as opener of the way. Jesus too institutes a ritual, the Eucharist, where bread and wine symbolize his body and blood, a divine meal shared to remember his sacrifice. Each ritual involves a choice, a moment where the sacred becomes physical, where the believer must act in faith, not just in belief. Visually, their colors and symbols mirror deeper meanings. EHSU's red and black beads represent duality, life and death, light and shadow, order and chaos. Jesus' baptismal waters and blood shed on the cross also speak of dual transformation. Death to the old self, rebirth into something holy. Both invite followers to step into mystery, to embrace the unknown as part of divine unfolding. At the core of both paths is one essential question. Will you choose to see the truth even when it's painful, inconvenient, or unclear? Will you listen at the crossroads, not for certainty, but for revelation? This is the essence of the divine messenger archetype. Whether in the robes of a Galilean healer or the cowries of a Yoruba trickster, this figure calls us to confront ourselves, to examine our motives, to embrace contradiction, and ultimately to be transformed. The next step is to explore this archetype more deeply, to ask what it means across cultures and time, to meet a messenger sent not just to speak, but to challenge. Because once we see the pattern, we can no longer unsee it. And what we do with that insight becomes the next test. In every great spiritual tradition, there is a figure who arrives not with ease, but with the disruption. Mythologists call them heralds, archetypal messengers who mark the beginning of a journey, a change, a revelation. Joseph Campbell described them as the call to adventure, those who disturb the ordinary world and awaken something dormant. In this space, both Jesus and EHSU stand unmistakably side by side. Though their methods differ, their message is the same. Transformation cannot happen without tension. EHSU embodies the trickster, but not in the sense of a liar or a joker. He is the sacred disruptor, the shadow that confronts ego, the mirror that distorts until you see the truth. In Jungian psychology, he would be the shadow self, the part of us we suppress, misunderstand, or fear. EHSU does not play games for pleasure. He exposes contradiction to move us closer to authenticity. He shows us who we are by testing what we claim to be. Jesus, on the other hand, fits the archetype of Redeemer, but not in the sanitized sense. He called out hypocrisy, rejected legalism, and welcomed those society cast aside. His words were fire wrapped in compassion. His presence disrupted both religious power and political order. Through sacrifice, he bridged heaven and earth. But even in redemption, he never offered simplicity. He taught in paradoxes, challenging the very definitions of power, justice, and holiness. Viewed through the lens of archetype, both figures become necessary. They are not opposites, but complementary forces. Jesus reveals through love and suffering. EHSU reveals through testing and confrontation. One heals by bearing pain, the other by provoking truth. Both open gates to the divine, to the self, to change. They also act as mediators. Jesus is the bridge between humanity and God, offering himself as the way, the truth, and the life. Eshu is the gatekeeper of the Yoruba pantheon, without whom no prayer reaches the Orishas. He decides which path opens, which remains closed. To approach the divine, one must pass through him, not by flattery but by integrity. Each figure in their own tradition controls access to the sacred. Their work is inward as much as it is cosmic. They deal in moral complexity, demanding inner honesty. For Eshu, that means exposing duplicity. For Jesus, it means confronting sin with grace. Neither asks for blind obedience. Both demand deep reflection. Their authority is not imposed. It is earned, recognized through transformation. Carl Jung argued that confronting the shadow was essential for wholeness. Wole Soyinka, in his interpretation of Yoruba thought, suggested that Eshu represents the necessary friction of change, the divine intelligence within disorder. Jesus too used disarray, flipping tables in temples, breaking Sabbath laws to reveal higher order beneath the surface of tradition. Together they remind us that the divine is not always gentle. Sometimes it is sharp. Sometimes it confuses before it clarifies. But always it invites. The path they both walk is not of comfort, but of growth. And while one path leads through a dusty cross and the other through a sacred crossroads, both demand the same thing, choice. What happens when we stop seeing Jesus and Eshu as irreconcilable figures and start seeing them as two lenses through which divine truth becomes visible? The paradox becomes power. The shadow becomes a guide. The cross and the crossroads, far from conflicting, become stages of the same sacred drama. One we are all called to enter. This is not about merging religions. It's about recognizing patterns, universal structures of divine movement, the messenger, the threshold, the transformation. And in recognizing them, we find that faith is not about certainty, but about courage. The courage to stand where old truths tremble and new ones begin. Colonization did not just take land, it took language, it took story, it took gods, and they renamed them demons. In the process of imperial conquest, spiritual systems that once held entire civilizations together were distorted beyond recognition. Eshu, guardian of the crossroads, divine messenger, teacher of hard truths, was among those most violently rebranded. Missionaries, unable or unwilling to understand his role in Yoruba cosmology, equated him with the Christian devil. They saw his unpredictability, his moral ambiguity, and mislabeled it as evil. But what they called deception was actually divine disruption. What they feared was a wisdom that challenged control. Jesus too was demonized, though differently. In his own time, religious elites called him dangerous, heretical, even possessed. The Roman Empire saw him as a political threat, not because he raised armies, but because he raised the poor, the broken, the forgotten. Power always resists prophets. Both Jesus and Eshu suffered at the hands of systems that could not tolerate truth spoken freely without filter. The colonial project went beyond religious distortion. It was cultural erasure. African spiritual systems weren't simply replaced. They were actively demonized. painted as dark, primitive, or superstitious. The crossroads was turned into a place of fear. The drum was silenced. The Orisha became taboo. In their place came crosses, saints, and catechisms, tools of salvation, yes, but also of suppression. And yet, the spirit didn't die. African spirituality did not vanish, it evolved. In Cuba, Eshu became Elegua, honored in Santeria. In Brazil, he dances in Candomblé. In Haiti, the crossroads spirit lives on in Papalegba. These forms weren't simply resistance, they were survival. The sacred encoded itself in Catholic symbols, hiding in plain sight. Worship continued behind veils of saints, under the names of apostles. Colonization did not destroy these systems. It forced them to become more creative, more resilient. In this way, African spirituality teaches us that power cannot be erased. It only changes shape. What missionaries saw as defeat was in fact adaptation. What they believed was conversion was, for many, concealment. The gods were never gone. They were waiting. Even within Christianity itself, the spirit of resistance remained. Jesus' story could not be tamed. His words, "Blessed are the poor, woe to the powerful," were dynamite beneath the cathedrals of empire. His life was not a template for quiet obedience, but a blueprint for spiritual revolt. And in the global south, in the churches of the oppressed, Jesus became a symbol not of conquest, but of freedom. The demonization of Eshu and the sanctification of Jesus both reveal the same truth. Power seeks to control the story. But the deeper narrative, the one whispered by ancestors and carried in ritual, never disappears. It simply waits to be remembered. When people reclaim their stories, when they revive the gods of their lineage and question the meanings imposed upon them, the old distortions begin to crack. History leaves traces. In the forgotten shrines, the half-remembered songs, the rituals passed down in secret, there is still fire. There is still spirit. The colonial narrative may have redrawn the spiritual map, but the original landmarks were never lost. They live in blood, in breath, in memory. So the question is not whether colonization changed everything. It did. The question is whether the sacred survived. And the answer is yes, in drums that still beat, in names that are spoken again, in the realization that power tried to bury truth. But truth, like spirit, knows how to rise. What does all of this mean for us here and now? It means that at every turning point in our lives, at every moment where something must be surrendered or reclaimed, we are standing at the crossroads. And the divine messenger is still there. Whether you see him in the red and black of Eshu or the torn robes of Jesus, the call is the same. Be awake. Pay attention. The path you choose will shape not just your future, but who you become in it. These figures are not relics of ancient religion. They are living archetypes present whenever transformation knocks on the door of the human soul. The crossroads asks you to decide with integrity. The cross asks you to carry what you cannot yet explain. Both are symbols of spiritual initiation. They don't offer comfort, they offer change. And that change, often born through fire, becomes the seed of growth. EHSUA challenges us with chaos so we can clarify our motives. Jesus challenges us with grace so we can confront our wounds. If you're in a moment of uncertainty, tension, or conflict, it may not be a punishment. It may be a visitation. Maybe that hard choice you're facing is EHSUA standing quietly, waiting to see how honest you'll be with yourself. Maybe the heartbreak that cracked you open is Jesus whispering, "This is how we grow." Divine messengers are not always gentle. Sometimes they appear as contradictions, testing your spirit, forcing you to decide whether you'll run from the challenge or walk through it. So ask yourself, what spiritual test are you walking through right now? Are you resisting it? Or are you letting it transform you? What truth is trying to reach you? Not through a sermon or a scripture, but through your own experience. Maybe you've already met Eshu or Jesus and didn't even realize it. And if you're still searching, know this: you're not alone. The sacred doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, awareness, a willingness to wrestle with what feels unclear. Divine messages often arrive in disguise, in riddles, in reversals. But if you listen closely, they will guide you forward. The road isn't easy, but it's sacred, and you are already walking it. From the cross to the crossroads, two sacred figures stand, not as enemies, but as reflections. Jesus and Eshu, each in their own way, carry the same divine assignment to guide us into truth, to challenge the comfortable, to awaken the spirit. They are messengers not bound by doctrine, but alive in story, symbol, and transformation. Both call us to reflect, to choose, and to become. And when we meet them, not in temples or textbooks, but in the raw tension of life, we are changed. Colonization tried to fracture the sacred mirror. It turned Eshu into a demon and Jesus into a weapon. But the divine is not so easily silenced. These truths, buried under centuries of fear and power, are being remembered again. And in that remembering, healing begins. This isn't heresy, it's restoration. It's the reclaiming of wisdom that was never lost, only hidden. So now, I invite you to walk forward with clearer eyes. When you feel pulled in opposite directions, listen. When the path is unclear, pause. The crossroads is not your enemy. It is the beginning. And the divine messenger, however you name him, is still speaking. If this journey spoke to something deep within you, don't let it end here. Speak back. Tell us in the comments what is stirred in you. Like this video, not as routines, but as ritual. Share it with someone who stands at their own crossroads and needs to remember that spirit speaks in many tongues. And subscribe. Not for content, but for connection. Because the more we explore together, the more sacred truths come back into the light. Thank you for walking this path with us. The messenger never stopped speaking. Now we begin to listen.